I'm going to share this video in our Aloor marathon group, so you'll be able to see. For those of you who are just here, just make sure that you are able to comment in both sessions, in here and also in your group, if you don't want to ask any questions in public but only want to ask questions in the group. I will be able to check both at the end as always, and I will be able to answer you. It looks like everything is good and you should see everything fine. So I think we'll be ready to start, right? Let me know, guys. Am I not freezing anymore? Hopefully not. I don't see any interruptions now, so it should be all okay. Okay guys, it looks like everything is okay, no interruptions, so we are able to start, right? Let me know. Please comment so I'll be able to see what the delay is. And I don't think we are going to have any more interruptions, guys. I'll just wait a little bit so all of you are going to join. I don't know what the camera guy fixed actually but he is definitely smarter than me, so he knows what to do and when. So luckily I have him, because otherwise it won't be even possible. Okay, I'll just share the link once again in our Aloor marathon group, just to be sure that everyone is able to see. Hey guys. And we are going to start just in a couple of minutes. Okay, awesome. So guys, I wasn't planning on doing this video public, but as I mentioned in my previous video, I keep receiving so many questions from you about the shading, about different techniques, about depth, about the movement and all of that. And as I keep sharing the videos on my Instagram, and obviously I'm sharing my techniques with you, I thought it would be nice if I'm going to give you some more tips and tricks. So while you are locked home now, you will be able to perfect your technique, and you will be able to come back even stronger with even better work, right? So I am here today to share with you my shading technique. I'm going to tell you about the needles, about the movements, about pigments, just about the different techniques, the different ways how you are able to actually perform shading. And today we are going to work with the machine. I'm not going to explain anything about manual shading, as we are going to speak about it on the last day. And today is our 8th day already. It's actually unbelievable, because it seems like we just started yesterday or a couple days ago, but we are already with you guys for more than a week. Can you imagine? And I hope that all your work is already so much better, that you improved all your strokes. And finally, it's time to speak more about the shading, right? So before we start, I want to remind you that tomorrow the amazing Angie Kwiatkowski is going to join us in our private Aloor marathon group, and she is going to share with all of you guys her signature eyeliner technique. She is going to share with you how she's doing those amazing shaded eyeliners. It will be very, very useful. She told me, I'm not allowed to tell you about that actually, but I'll just give you a sneak peek. She told me that she's going to give you some tips on mapping. She's going to give you some tips on the difference between organic and inorganic pigments for eyeliner. So you can imagine how useful it's going to be, but it's going to be tomorrow, not today. And then on the last day we are going to speak about few other shading methods, and I'm going to show you the manual shading as well. So just so you know what is left with our marathon. And for those of you who are not with us, there is a link above this post, and if you are willing to review the videos we already did, those 7 videos we already did, you are able to register online. All the videos we do, they are all recorded and they are going to stay in a group for a while, so you will be able to catch up and still check those live videos that we are going to have on Wednesday and Thursday. So that's a bit of introduction. And I would like to start, guys, actually explaining you about the shading. And I want to tell you today everything about single needles. I do use different needles for shading, but mostly I like to work with the single needle, and as always, as everything, it's definitely a thing of preference. There will be many artists who will work with different configurations, and I keep reminding everyone that you definitely need to try. You definitely need to understand how every needle works for you, and this is how you are going to make your decision, right? So if something works for other person, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to work for you as well. And the best way to know it is simply try it. And again, I do use different needles for shading, but most likely I'm working with the single needle, and today I want to speak more about the single needle, and I want to tell you when using a single needle will be the best option and when it would be a good reason to actually change your needles and use a little bigger configurations, like for example round shaders or even magnum needles. So first of all, what you need to understand about needles is that as more needles you are going to have in the cartridge, as more it will remind like a brush once you are going to work on the skin. And if you are going to work with just single needle, you need to understand that this needle is going to be the sharpest one, and with that needle you'll have way more chances to go deeper than you should, especially if you are just a beginner and you don't really have experience with the shading and with the single needle in general. No matter what is the thickness of your single needles, anyway, when it's single, it's just super sharp, and you have that chance that you may go deeper and you may cause more trauma to the skin. So first of all, what you need to understand is that no matter what needles we are using, no matter what technique we are going to do, we should always use just the very tip of our needles. And the needle may stick out from the cartridge. So this is my cartridge here and the single needle inside. The needle may stick out from the cartridge and it might be quite long, like sometimes even 2 millimeters or 2.5. It really depends on your machine, your preference, and just the result you are trying to achieve. But that definitely doesn't mean that all that length is going to go into the skin. You are going to use that length just to make sure that you have a nice pigment flow, and also to make sure that you are quite precise, that you are actually able to see that needle. And no matter how long your needle is, no matter how long it sticks out from the cartridge, you should always use just the tip. And permanent makeup in general is a super gentle technique. Maybe some time ago there were different techniques, different methods, and we used to think about permanent makeup in a bit different way. So you just need to understand that the thickness of the skin in general is really, really thin, and all we need for the pigment to stay in the skin is we need to pass the epidermis and to implant the pigment into the first layer of dermis, and that is definitely way less than those 2 millimeters or 2 millimeters and a half. And if we are going deeper than that, of course we are going to cause the trauma to the skin. We may cause scars. We'll get all of those unnecessary shades like grayish or bluish shades and everything that we actually don't want. Many people think that if we are going to go deeper, this will help us to keep that color, to keep that result longer. And definitely that is true. If we are going to implant the pigment deeper than we should, the color is going to stay there so much longer. But in addition to that, what will happen with the pigment, you'll have a huge chance that it's going to migrate, and also that the color of the pigment is not going to be that nice as you wish. So I would advise you to choose your pigments wisely, and there will be many different options you are able to choose from. We will be talking about it a little bit later, and I'll explain you a little bit about the pigments. But do not use this rule, and always try to work as superficial as possible. There are different ways to keep the pigment in the skin longer. You definitely don't want to go deeper only for that reason. That is not enough to follow that rule and to go deeper than you should, because by going deeper again you are going to have all those bad things in addition. So definitely this is not what your client wants. And another thing, you should also understand that when we are working with a single needle, and I mentioned already that this needle is going to be super sharp, the sharpest option available from all different configurations, you need to make sure that you are working on the skin that is not super sensitive. And if you are working with the skin that is sensitive, that is truly a thin skin, where you see those capillaries so close to the surface of the skin, as for me, it doesn't really make sense to work with the single needle, because definitely you may cause even more trauma to the skin. It will be more difficult to implant the color into the skin, and this would be a good reason to switch and work with the bigger configurations, to switch to round shaders or magnum needles. As more needles you have in your cartridge, as more it reminds you a brush, and as more difficult is to go deeper than you should. And of course still you will be able to go deeper if you are going to press more, but you just have less chances than using a single needle. So I wouldn't advise to work with a single needle on a very thin vascular skin, the skin that is super sensitive, like transparent skin almost. Try to use bigger configurations, and we are going to speak about bigger configurations on the last day, and I'm going to show you how to work with those shaders or magnum needles as well. Do you have any questions, guys? Let me know and I will continue. You know that once I start talking and all the different thoughts come to my mind, I don't know sometimes how to continue and what to tell you first. So if you are going to ask me questions, it might be easier for me to give you more information, the information you need at this moment. And I'll just quickly check our group before we will continue. Yes, Susan, it was Darius. Darius is the one who is responsible for all of this, and without him, I don't think it would be possible. I would probably do some live videos just with my phone, but definitely I won't be able to do all of that camera things and lightings and different angles and all of the things, you know. So yeah, he is the one who does all of that. I'll just quickly check your questions. Xiang, are you asking about tomorrow's time? Tomorrow we are starting at 2 p.m. Pacific time, as always, same time as always. I'm going to update that in our group, so it will be the same time for tomorrow and for the last day. And regarding the thick and oily skin, once I will be working on artificial skin, I will explain you what we are actually getting when we are working with the single needle, and it will be easier for you to understand what may happen when we work and do that shading pixelation on oily skin or thicker skin. And I will give you some advices what to do when you have oily or thicker skin. And probably you remember my example that I was showing to you what is happening with the strokes on oily skin and bigger pores. The example when I was drawing those strokes on a paper and a paper towel, right? So you need to remember about that always when you are doing permanent makeup. Just with shading you will be slightly different because we are shading the whole eyebrow and we are trying to achieve that powdery result. So I'm going to speak about it step by step. And I'm going to speak about different pigments at the end of my presentation. So I'll give you just a little bit of the insight which pigments will work. I cannot actually tell better, but I always like to mention that there are no bad pigments. There is no brand that will produce bad pigments. Well, maybe, of course, I'm not talking about all the cases. There are pigments, those are just not as clean, as pure as other pigments. But if we talk about really reputable brands and just different ingredients, different pigments in general, like organic pigments and inorganic pigments, both will be definitely good. And what you need to understand is you need to You need to be able to read those ingredients. You need to clearly know the difference between the organic and inorganic. You need to know what to expect when you are working with one kind and another kind. And you need to know those specifics, how you should work when you are using inorganic pigment and how you should work with inorganic. Also, what will happen after some time when you are using the organic or inorganic. And to be honest, I don't think there are pigments, those are like 100% ideal, especially if your technique is not 100%. So in most cases, it's not about the pigment, it's about your knowledge. And I would say that all pigments are great. You just need to make your choice wisely, depending on what your client wants, depending on what result you are trying to achieve, and all those important factors. And this is how you are going to choose the particular type. So definitely do not think that you should only use one kind and never another kind. It all depends on what you are trying to achieve. Okay guys, so first I'm going to start showing you the movement, and I want to show you a couple different movements. Here, I'll just adjust. Okay, is it clear enough? Let me know. You lost me? Really? Everyone lost me? Or is that just you, Mary? Tell me guys, it shows on the screen that everything is fine. I don't think anything changed. Just try to refresh maybe. Okay, so guys, I'm going to use the first I'm going to use the newest Aloor Virtual machine, but then I know that many of you who are watching me are using our basic Aloor machine as well, so don't worry about that. I'm going to show you how I work with that machine as well, and I'm going to discuss the speed and all the settings. So many of you do not have the newest Aloor yet because we only got a limited amount, but just in general I'm going to speak about different machines, and I'm going to show you how to work with both. Okay, thank you so much for letting me know. In case it will happen again, I'm sure you'll tell me. So guys, first of all, what you want to check before you are going to do your shading movement, and of course for those of you who are practicing, who are just starting, you should make sure that you are perfecting your shading on artificial skin first, right? You do not want to do your first treatment on a client if you haven't improved, if you haven't perfected actually your shading on artificial skin. So just make sure that you feel really comfortable with your movement before you are going to try it on your first client, right? And definitely doing it with instructor's supervision is very, very recommended, and I do not recommend you starting without it. But as you have a lot of time now, you can definitely improve a lot, and there are so many of you who already finished some classes, who already tried, and those of you who still keep struggling with the retention, with the depth, with the pressure, with the movements and all of that. It's an amazing time to actually improve it, right? So this is why I'm speaking about it, not because I want you to teach how to do it now and then next day you are going to go and do the treatment on your client. It's not going to work like that, because of course there are so many more things to know about it, right? So what you want to do when you are practicing on your artificial skin, you want to make sure, same like we were learning during all those days, you want to make sure that your movement is comfortable. And again, the comfortable movement will be the movement when you are either going away from you or coming towards you. There should be no movements those you would do in a horizontal way. And if you feel at any time when you are doing the shading that it's not comfortable, that is probably because your movement is not away from you or towards you, that you are probably trying to shade in a horizontal way. And please check that. Also, another thing you want to check, let me make it a little bigger so you see it. You want to have a nice support with your pinky, and also you want to make sure that your arm has a nice support, and almost the whole arm stays either on a table you are practicing, or at least a part of your arm stays on your client's body. So definitely ask about it. Definitely inform your client that you are going to touch her during the session. And I am really touching my client a lot. I keep my arm on my client's breast part, especially when I'm working with the left side. You need to have a lot of support. You cannot work when your hand is hanging over, simply because you will get tired so soon, and your movement will never be exactly the way you want to. So just make sure you have enough support and that you don't feel any tension in your fingers, in your arm, in your wrists. So just make sure it is comfortable. And again, this is how you'll check that. If you feel any tension, if you feel that you are not comfortable, change your movement and make sure you have enough support. When I work with shading, I am always on the side of my client. So I never at the back, not like with the strokes. Sometimes I come for some parts of the brows. Sometimes I come and do the shading from the strokes from the back. When I do the shading, I am always on the side and I do not change sides. So I'm always on the right side, and I do one eyebrow at a time and then another eyebrow from that same position. The only thing I am changing when I work with the left side, I ask my client to turn a little bit closer to me. So basically like this, if it would be artificial skin. And when I work with my client's right side, I ask my client to move a little bit away from me, so it's easier to get in a better contact with the eyebrow, right? So I don't need to change my position that much. And I do not move a lot, but of course I keep adjusting myself with my shoulders a little bit. So I may move a little bit to one side, a little bit to another side, but still I'm staying always on one side. And of course, if you are left-handed, everything is opposite. So instead of sitting on the right side of your client, you will be sitting on the left side. Sometimes it feels like it would be easier to move around and to do one side from one side of your client and then another side. You need to come back and stay on that side. You will feel all of that in the beginning. And in the beginning, with everything will be difficult. You will be struggling more. So I would advise you to keep practicing, staying on that same side, because definitely it will take you so much less time. You won't need to move that much, and it's definitely possible to do just from one side. Just make sure you are using all those tips, that is comfortable, that you are using the movement either away from you or towards you. And as more you'll practice on artificial skin, just sitting on one same side and avoid moving your artificial skin too much, you'll simply get used to it more. And then once you work on your actual client, definitely you will be more comfortable as well. Okay guys, so I'll start with the movement, and before I start I want to tell you that definitely when we are doing shading, we are working with the we are setting the speed of the machine slower. We are working at a slower speed. And for those of you who are working with the basic Aloor, I would recommend using the speed around 4. And for the Aloor Virtua machine, the settings are a little different. For those of you who remember, the newest Aloor has 2 settings, and you are able to adjust the hit on the power supply and also the speed. So those of you who purchased the newest Aloor Virtua machine are going to get that free coaching about the setting, because the setting is going to be completely different than all of the other machines you were ever working with. So it's very important to understand how changing the hit is going to change the result. So with all other machines you are able to change the speed only. With some machines you are able to use some different parts, change the stroke manually, but with the newest Aloor machine you will be able to change that hit on the power supply. So it's very important to understand how you are going to do that, and when you will need to do that. So I'm not going to explain you about it, but you just need to know that when you do the shading, you want to work at a slower speed. Why you want to work at a slower speed is because as slower the needle goes inside and outside from the cartridge, as bigger distance you are going to have between your dots, and you don't want to go and work at a fast speed, because then the needle goes inside and outside super fast, so you are going to get those dots super close to each other. And another factor that will actually help you to get those dots and either get those closer to each other or farther apart is the way how fast or how slow your movement is going to be. So the movement for the shading should always be faster than the movement when you are doing the strokes. But guys, it's very important to understand that when you are shading, you actually want to shade it in the safest way possible, and that means that you don't want to shade too fast. And yes, we are used to tell that shading is a fast movement, but it's not the fast like a rocket. You don't need to shade super fast, because as faster you shade, as more trauma you may cause to the skin. How you will be able to check that, and that is very important, guys, when you shade and once you wipe, you need to see those dots clearly. You don't want to see teardrops, the tiny teardrops, like when you scratch the skin too fast and you wipe and use, instead of the clear rounded nice dots, you see the teardrops. It means that you were shading way too fast, and you are actually causing trauma to the skin. So that is very important, guys. Always check that, and if you see that on artificial skin, definitely same thing is going to happen with your clients as well. And you may think that you do everything right, that your pressure is right, but if you are shading just faster than you need to, and definitely for every skin type it will be a bit different. You will feel like you are not really able to implant a lot of pigment into the skin, and from the moment you will change your hand speed, hand motion, and from the moment you are going to shade a little slower, not in that same speed like you would do the stroke, of course not like that, but just a little slower, not crazy fast like this, right? Just a little slower. You will see that your dots is more clear, clean, and you don't see any of the teardrops, right? So this is how I shade, and now I'm only using one direction, and I'm shading towards me. I like to keep repeating that when you shade, there is no big difference in the direction the way you are shading. It's either towards you or away from you. So if I'm going to show you another movement, that will go away from me now, so towards the tail, in other words. And again, guys, now I'm just shading to one side. You can see that I'm going to achieve the exact same result. The difference is that not all of us will feel comfortable doing this movement both sides, and that is completely okay. You may feel more comfortable going towards you, and you may feel less comfortable going away from you, or opposite. What you want to do, actually, you want to make sure that you are doing the movement that is the most comfortable for you. Once you will improve that movement, once you feel that you definitely feel right, definitely feel comfortable, you don't feel any tension, and you are getting those nice clean dots, it's time then to try another movement, the opposite, the one that you don't like that much. So if you prefer to go towards you, if you go towards the front always, right, and this movement is completely fine for you, only then you want to try another movement which will be away from you. And if you don't feel comfortable with that movement, if you feel that this movement is doing lines for you, or the dots are not that nice, not that clean, simply don't do that. Do the movement that is the most comfortable for you. Another movement that we are able to do is when we are doing both movements at a time, when we swing on the skin, when we do the pendulum movement or the clock motion, no matter how you are going to call that movement. It's simply when we are combining both, when we do the movement towards us and then we are coming back at a time. And you should understand that this movement will be the most difficult to do, right? So if you feel comfortable with both first, so you feel really comfortable with one way, then you are improving and getting better with another way. Only when you are comfortable with both, it's time to try the movement back and forth. And this is how that movement is going to look like. So you can see that I'm doing my dots, that I'm doing my shading both ways, so not just one way. But I do my dots to both different directions at a time. This movement, what you will feel when you are doing this movement, definitely first thing is that you will be able to shade the whole eyebrow so much faster, right? Because with other movements you are just going one way and then you are coming back without touching the skin, and then you are implanting the pigment again. So if you are going to touch the skin when you are coming back, it means that you are going to implant pigment as well at that time. So it means that you are going to finish not twice faster, but like in general just faster. But please do not think that if you are not able to do this movement, if you are not able to go back and forth at a time, that you won't be able to achieve nice powdery results. The most important thing when you are doing the shading, and I'm going to focus on that today because most of you who are watching the video clearly are starting, or just the beginners who are struggling, so I don't want to give you too much of the difficult movements, right? You need to start from something, you need to improve first. And what you want to check clearly first is that when you are doing the movement, you want to start and you want to touch the skin from the very beginning, from the above. You want to gently go onto the skin and then you want to lift it out. So if you pay a close attention to my needle, to my movement, you'll see that I'm not doing the movement just like that, like in a straight line, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? This is not the way to do the shading. You want to start from the above, you want to touch the skin gently, and then you want to lift. And this is what pendulum movement means. And either you are touching the skin at both times, both ways, or you are touching the skin, then lifting, coming back, touching the skin, lifting, coming back. Or if you are doing the movement away from you, you do the same. You touch the skin when you are going away, then you are coming back, touch the skin, then you are going away. You don't want to do the movement in a straight lines, and you always want to make sure that you are taking the needle out. You don't want to place the tip of the needle inside the skin and keep moving inside the skin. You always want to go out. This way, when you are doing the nice pendulum movement, when you are landing on the skin in a soft way, what you are going to get? You are going to get tiny dots in the very beginning. You are going to get a little darker and more dots in the middle, and you are going to get again tiny and line dots at the end of your motion. And once you are getting that, you are able to combine all those separate sections in one long section, and there won't be any columns visible, there won't be any connections visible. Why? Because you are going to have light beginning and then light beginning here. So it means that once you'll go over, or once you'll start adding another section, the connection won't be visible. And that's the key when you are doing your shading, right? So you saw on this video on the screen that I started somewhere in the middle of eyebrow. That is not because this is how I usually work. When I work, I start from the tail and I go towards the front, but I started this way just because this part of the eyebrow is wider, and it was easier for me to show you how I go and why. You definitely want to shade tiny bit more on the very tail if your client wants that definition on the tail. And then as closer to the front you are coming, as bigger distance you want between your dots, and as lighter the result you want in the front. So you want to get that gradation effect, right? To achieve that gradation effect, all you need to do is to make your movement a little longer. As longer your movement is, guys, I'm going to show you on a second section. I'm going to come back and show you that eyebrow, but I just want to show you the difference. If you are going to shade like this, short movement, see? My movement is super short and tiny. And I'm going back. So this is how that section looks like. Quite dark, quite intense. Not like it would be enough if we are trying to shade in something completely, but you can see how dark and how intense it is. And then if I'm going to do a longer movement, can you see the difference, guys? Can you see how much bigger the spacing in between those dots is, right? So this is how you will be able to get the nice gradation. If you need it darker, simply you want to go a little shorter. If you need it lighter, especially working with the front, you want to go longer. And as longer your movement is, as bigger the distance will be between the dots, and this is how you are going to get the lighter front. And definitely when I work on the tail, let's go back to an eyebrow. I started already. When I'm working on the tail, and if I want that tail, by the way, I just wiped and I want to show you how it looks like. This section is so much darker, you can clearly see it, right? And this section has more empty spaces. Now let's go back to this eyebrow. I'm going to finish and shade a little bit in some other parts, and I'm going to wipe. But what I was trying to explain you is that if you want that definition on the tail or on the lower part of eyebrow or anywhere else you want darker color, maybe the whole tail, maybe even the body, you want to shade in a little shorter motion, and everywhere you want to get lighter results, so it might be the top of eyebrow, it might be the front, anywhere you want to get the lighter result, you are going to shade with a little longer motion. Another thing I haven't mentioned to you is the way we are connecting sections. And now I will wipe my first pass. I'm going to do the second pass, and I'll show you how I'm connecting my sections. The artificial skin that I use, and I'm telling you this because I know that you keep asking about it, it has the outline that will disappear if you are going to rub a little bit more. So if you don't want it to disappear, if you still want to shade and follow the line, then you just want to wipe in a gentle way. But if you want to get rid of it, you just want to rub a little bit more. And this is how it will disappear. Another thing, guys, if you want to keep your artificial skin clean when you are shading, all you want to do is you want to wipe in one direction. You don't want to keep rubbing, moving with your gauze all over. You can do that after that once the biggest amount of pigment is already on your gauze but not on artificial skin. But just to make sure that your skin is clean, all you want to do is you want to start either on the tail or on the front and wipe all of that pigment to one direction, and then you are free to rub and make it even cleaner. And I'm using 91% of alcohol. I like to use it the most to clean my artificial skin, not on a client of course, because it cleans the latex very well, and also it dries out super fast, so I don't need to use any additional tissues to wipe on top. I don't need to use any Vaseline, any ointments, any wipes, anything like that. I just spray a little bit of alcohol on the gauze, I wipe, and after 10 seconds it's nice and dry and I can move on with the second pass. Speaking about passes, guys, if your movement is correct, if you are consistent, if you are precise, if you are not too fast like I mentioned before, most likely it will be enough to do 2 passes to get the nice color in and to get the nice result. And of course I always leave that half of the pass for the very end when I'm working on the details. So if you will ask me how many passes I usually do 2 to 3 passes. And it's very important to choose your pigment in the correct way. I keep repeating to all of the artists and all of my students especially, do not make the mistake and do not use the lighter color because you are afraid of a tattoo effect, let's say. Many of us are choosing lighter color because we look at the color on the bottle. In the bottle it looks surprisingly dark and we think, no way, I'm not going to use this color, it will be definitely too dark for my client. And then we are choosing a little lighter version. We do 1 pass, we wipe, we don't see that much color. We do the second pass, we wipe, again we don't see that much color. We do the 3rd pass, we do the 4th pass, and finally we see that the skin becomes more irritated. We may see more pinpoint bleeding, we may see more lymph coming out. Our client will start complaining that it's already not that nice, that it might be a little bit more painful, and then we don't know what to do and we think that something is wrong with our technique. And to fix all of that, simply all you need to do is to switch to a little darker color. You don't want to implant that much of the pigment into the skin, and this is, guys, when you have all those problems with the color shifting. If you are implanting the color in a proper way, if you are not implanting too much, if we speak about the inorganic colors, all inorganic colors are meant to fade in about 1 to 2 years, depending on how many passes you'll do, depending on the skin type and all of those other factors. But if you are going to use that same color, and instead of actually going with the right color, if you are going to use lighter color, and if you will be trying to do many passes to achieve that density, to achieve that darkness, you are going to implant so much more color inside the skin, and of course the color is not going to fade in 1 or 2 years like it's supposed to fade. And the bad thing about it is that there will be that not nice residue of the pigment that clearly we don't want to see after some time. So with inorganic colors, it will be that orange shade or reddish shade or pinkish shade. So what you want to understand is that you should always use a little darker color. If you see, like from the very first pass, if you see that you don't see a lot of color, you understand that your technique is okay, your pressure is okay, you are consistent, but with some skin types, let's say with the especially with the thicker skin, with the skin that is not that nice and smooth, with the skin where you see that the structure is not that perfect. Definitely you'll need to go with a little darker color, and then all you need to do is do that same amount of passes, 2 to 3 passes. In the very rare cases you maybe will do that half of the pass, so 3.5, but just in general 2 to 3 is just the perfect amount of passes you'll need for your shading, and then it will fade nicely after some time. Very similar might be with the organic colors, and you know that all organic colors are the colors that are a little stronger than the inorganic colors. They are going to stay in the skin longer. So if you don't want those colors to stay in the skin longer, definitely think before you are going to go with more passes, and also choose your color wisely. You do not want to work with a darker color actually when you are working with the organic colors. You want to go with just the regular color, right? Because you know that organic colors are not going to fade that fast. They are going to stay in the skin longer. So just make sure you are using lighter color and you are not doing that many passes. So maybe even 1.5 pass for a really smooth and nice skin might be enough. Also, be very careful with all your mature clients because most likely they will heal a little darker, and you don't want that. So my advice, using darker color definitely won't be great for everyone. You are not going to listen to this advice if you are going to work with the mature skin. You will work in the opposite way. You are going to choose a little lighter color to get the result that you are looking for. Okay guys, so I want to show you my second pass, but also what I want to explain you here is how you want to connect those sections. And to be honest, when I'm working on my client, before I'll move on with the second pass, what I like to do first, I like to do that perfecting step. So I probably would add some pigment in those lighter spots, those I see that are a little lighter, just to make sure that everything is nice and consistent. So not like I'm actually working on the whole eyebrow, but just adding some color here and there. This is what I like to do before I'll start with my second pass. And guys, if you are doing the nice movement, this is how you want to connect your sections. Wait, let me move it a little bit. I'm going to start on the tail in the way like I work with my clients. And once you finish your tail, my second pass is usually not that intense, not that consistent, and not that dark, because I already have quite a lot of color after my first pass. But again, please remember that if your movement is right, you see this section here lighter, you see this section where you started lighter, and then you see this section here tiny bit darker. So the dots in this section are a little bigger and a little closer to each other, and the dots in here are a little farther apart and a little lighter. And once you are starting with another section, what you want to do is you want to start from the middle of your previous section. So you actually want to start on that part that is lighter, just to make that nice and smooth transition. That is very important to avoid getting those columns, getting those darker spots. So once I'll start with my second section, I'm not going to start right here where I finished. I'm going to start from the middle of my previous section. And then I'm going to do the same. I'm going to start from the middle of the section I already did. I don't want to work too fast, right? Remember, you don't want to get those teardrops. You want to get the dots, nice and clean dots. If you, once you wipe, you see the teardrops but not the dots, it means that your movement is incorrect and you are probably shading faster than you should. I'm working only with the tip of my needle. And when I keep extending my section, I always start on my previous section. I'm overlapping a little bit always to get that nice and smooth transition from one section to another section. So before I will continue to the whole eyebrow to the front, I just want to show you the difference, how it looks like. After that second pass on the tail. Yeah, so you already see how the tail is darker and all the other part is lighter. And in general, I would only need to go just a tiny bit in here to make a nice transition in the middle of the body. And if I want that nice ombre result where the color goes from the tail towards the front and it's lighter in the front, I would actually stop and I wouldn't add any more color. But you need to be sure that it matches with the color of the natural hair, that it's dark enough, and that you were super close when you were doing your lines, those lines, the shading lines. You need to be sure that you actually implanted the color in the right way. So what you want to see when you finished, if you are going for that natural result, I'm not speaking now about that heavy makeup look. This is not the way to get the heavy makeup look, those stronger, bolder eyebrows. You are going to work in a bit different way once you want to achieve that. Now I'm only speaking about that natural result when it looks powdery. And when it reminds like just a shadow on eyebrows, but not something heavy, not like a pencil, not like a heavy pencil. So I'm going to add a little bit more shading in that middle section. And when I work on details, when I'm doing that half of the pass at the end, I keep wiping and checking. So I will just add a little bit here and there just to make sure I have nice transition everywhere, and especially you may want to do a lot of that when you are working on the real skin. On the real skin, when the structure of the skin is not that nice like artificial skin. And why you want to do that is because definitely you'll feel that the skin is not absorbing the pigment in that exact same way, right? So in the places where it's nice and smooth, it will absorb the color better. In those places where there is some different structure, some damage, maybe a scar, maybe some hyperpigmentation, anything that doesn't look nice and smooth, you may want to go and shade a little bit more. Only on artificial skin you are able to achieve softer result, almost like after first pass, and that is because artificial skin is nice and smooth. And if you are working with the nice and smooth skin, then definitely it will be so much easier to get a nice and smooth result. But if the skin is not that smooth, not that nice, bigger pores, sensitive skin, thicker skin, then of course you will be working on those details a little longer, right? So let's say that basically is what I do. Let's leave it for now. And I want to explain you a little bit what you are going to get if you will do that exact same technique, that exact same way on an oily skin, and how it will look like on a very nice and smooth skin. Probably you keep guessing all the time when someone is posting nice powdery results and nice powdery healed results, where those pixels are super visible, and sometimes we want to achieve those pixels so bad for some reason. So we are just going for those pixels and we don't want anything else, just pixels. So if you want to achieve those pixels even after healing, you need to understand that if you work on an oily skin or skin with the bigger pores or thick skin, it won't be really possible to achieve those pixels. And if you are following me, I was explaining that for quite a few times. I was trying to explain you that you only are able to actually get those pixels once it's healed, of course, only when you work with a nice and smooth skin that almost reminds you artificial skin. And as more it will remind you the artificial skin, as more of those pixels you will be able to see. However, if you are working on oily skin, and you know what happens with the pigment when you are working with the oily skin, you have, and same actually would happen if you are working with the sensitive skin, you always have more chances that the pigment is going to migrate a little bit more. What does that mean? It definitely does not mean that an eyebrow is going to expand or the shape is going to change, the color will migrate somewhere on your eyelids, on your client's eyelids. But what it means is that the color is going, all those dots are going to become a little wider after healing, and they are going to become a little wider after some time. And that doesn't mean that the eyebrow is going to become wider and thicker with every month or every year. It will only mean that all those dots after some time, and especially after healing, when everything is settling inside the skin during the healing, not after the healing. But once your client will come back and you'll see that healed result, you will see that those dots are blended with each other. And that doesn't mean that you did something wrong. If you were consistent enough, if the spacing between your dots was nice, if you actually did the dots but not the teardrops, those dots will nicely blend with each other, and they will create the powdery look on oily skin, on thin skin. And this is how it's going to look like. But those pixels are not going to be visible because of the skin type. So if you are trying to achieve at any cost those pixels, you just need to know that it is impossible on that particular skin type. And it's, as for me, the easiest way to achieve those pixels is when I'm working with a single needle, but definitely there is a good way to achieve those pixels using a magnum needle as well. And if you are working on an oily skin or sensitive skin, very thin vascular skin, I would advise you to work with the bigger needle configuration, like 3 round shader or 5 round shader or magnum needles. Why? Because as more needles you are using, as faster you are going to fill in an eyebrow. And with the single needle, you will need more time to fill in the whole eyebrow. And you want to use the single needle only when you want that precision, because obviously with the magnum you won't be really able to work on details that much. You are able to implant a lot of color in the middle of eyebrow, the body, the wider part of the tail and all of that, but you need some smaller configuration to work on details. However, if you work with oily skin, if you work with the sensitive skin, all the skin types, those will not be that perfect example for heal the pixels. It doesn't make sense to work with a single needle, to spend that much time going back and forth, especially if you are not really skilled, and if you feel that it's difficult for you to work with a single needle, right? Especially if you are not sure about your depth yet, especially if you are not sure just about the skin in general, what you need to feel. With the 3 shader, for example, or the 5 shader or the magnum, you are going to fill in an eyebrow so much faster. You will have way less chances that you will go deeper than you should. Of course, if you are not getting any spots, darker spots on artificial skin. And at the end, you will end up with that exact same powdery result. So it only makes sense to me to work with a single needle when I work with the really nice smooth skin, and then those pixels, they actually stay and they look like pixels. Anyway, those dots, they will become a tiny bit bigger and wider after healing, and this will happen with all pigments, with all skin types, just with everything. Just as better the skin is, as less changes you are going to see. And as worse the skin for us, for permanent makeup artists, is, as more changes you are going to see. So basically what I'm trying to explain you is that using round shaders or using magnum needles will be simply easier and faster, and you will end up with the very similar results. Do not try to achieve those pixels on the skin type that simply is not great for those pixels. And also what I want to tell about those pixels, I know that they are really trendy now, and many of us are struggling to get those pixels in a nice way. There will be actually clients who will hate that result, who will ask you to do just something more powdery, more solid, and not that pixelated. And definitely it's the thing of preference. So you need to know how to achieve different results. You need to know how to get pixels, how to get the powdery effect, and definitely do not think that for all your clients just one kind of needles, one kind of technique will work, and always take into consideration the skin type and of course the result that you are trying to achieve. And now you are able to ask me questions, definitely, if you have any, and I will tell you a little bit more about the pigments. And by the way, guys, I was using the needle that was 0.25, and before I start speaking about pigments, just a little bit, some basic knowledge. I want to show you how I work with the Aloor, the basic Aloor. And I'm going to do some shading on another eyebrow. For those of you who do use the basic Aloor, you want to work at a speed of 4. You want to work at a speed of 4, and all the rules are going to be the same. Just the difference you will feel when you work with the basic Aloor and the Aloor Virtuo is that as you are able to adjust the hit on the newest Aloor, you are able to work on different skin types, different thickness of the skin. You won't really feel the difference on latex because the actual latex is not giving you any vibration back. The thickness of it is exactly the same, so it will be difficult for you to feel the difference. However, you'll clearly feel the difference when you work on your client. And for different skin types, for different sensitivity, for different areas of the face, you will be able to adjust not only the speed but the hit as well. So on my Aloor, I'm working at a speed 4. And guys, I'm using Deluxe Brows pigments. Those pigments are inorganic pigments. And the pigments I work with, those Deluxe Brows pigments, they do not dry out. Let me move it a little bit here. Those pigments do not dry out, and that is very important for me, because when I work I don't need to worry that the pigment is going to dry out in the ring or in the cup. I simply use 4 to 5 drops of the pigment, and I'm just making sure that all of the pigment I have in my ring I'm going to use on my client. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because I really don't like the fact when you need to take more and more pigment after 20, 30, 40, maybe sometimes minutes. I do not dilute my pigments as well when I do the shading, and I don't do that simply because you don't need to do that with the inorganic pigments. Can you guys see my section now? I actually already did a couple of sections, and you are able to see that this part here where I started is lighter, the part in the middle is slightly darker, and the end of my section is lighter. And you need to keep going in that exact same way. And again, once you are going on top, once you are extending the section, you don't want to start where you finished, because it will stay empty and will be difficult to fill in afterwards. So you want to overlap that section, and you want to extend it in a way so again you are getting the darker middle part and lighter, and as you can see, I'm going towards the top and then I'm coming back, just making sure that all my lines, all the sections, all the lines in between are nice and consistent, and that everything is filled in. So I added another section, and again you see exact same thing, lighter, darker, and lighter at the end. Once you have these sections, it's easy to go on top of everything let's say if you want it even darker, or if you want to add more density, more color than you already did, it's easy to go on top of everything, and you are not making any of the columns inside your sections darker. So it's still the same, and it's easy to go on top. If you will be doing the shading and all those sections will be visible, so you'll clearly see one column, then another column, then another column, it means that definitely you are not starting in a gentle way, you are not touching the skin in a gentle way, or it may mean that you are doing the lines just like that, just back and forth, instead of going away from the skin. And as more you'll go on top of that, as more you'll try to fix it, as darker those columns will be, and as more visible it will be. Let me check your questions, guys. I see that you are asking something. Just let me make sure. Okay. So about the needles, it's not RL needles, guys. It's not round liner. It's around the shader I was talking about. You don't want to use RL needles for shading for your pixels. You want to use shaders. And shaders are different from liners because the configuration is different. There is a bigger space in between the needles, and the end of the tip is flat but not sharp like round liners are. I only do eyebrows on the side, so I only do work from one side, and I do both eyebrows. But definitely, if we speak about the movement, you are always able to mix and match your movement, and in case you want to add more color, more density, you are able to do a cross hatching, and you are able to go from the bottom towards the top. Depends on what style you are trying to achieve. I am going to show you how to work with the bigger configurations and the magnum needles on the last day of our marathon. So those of you who are in the marathon with me, I'm just letting you know that this will be our topic for the last day. I'm going to work with bigger configurations, and I'm going to speak about manual shading as well. Let me check other questions. I'm not sure I can see all of those. Let me try on my phone, because I saw there were quite a few. I was not really focused on them, guys. Let me know. Now, as I have my phone, you can ask some questions. Oh. Okay, I don't see all of the comments. I will be able to answer probably later, but if you'll start asking now, I'll see them. So guys, I only see the last, how many? 10 comments, and that's it. I don't see more. If you have some important questions and you want to ask me something right now, if you would be able to comment again, then I would see it on the screen. Just don't do that too fast. I need to be able to read it. So I already answered about the needles, should be around the shaders. Detailed outline, out of style. Well, definitely not. I was trying to explain you more about the movement. I was trying to explain you about how to achieve the most natural result. If you are going for a bolder look, if you are going for a makeup look, Of course, you are going to work in a bit different way. You want to define more the very bottom of the eyebrow, you want to define more the tail of your eyebrow, and then you may need a stronger, bolder outline. It all depends on what you are trying to achieve. So this example I was showing you before was if you are going for that natural result where it goes lighter towards the front, but just in general it doesn't look like a bold, heavy makeup. I hope that makes sense. Yes, Nina, when I do use different needles, I do the movement in the exact same way. I work in a slightly different way, but just in general, the answer is definitely yes. I also do the pendulum movement. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you so much. How do you clean the needle when you want to change the color? Well, just in general, usually I work either with one color or with two colors. I may use different color for my strokes or different color for the front of eyebrow. How I clean the needle, I clean it in a very simple way. I am just using some saline, so just pretend I have it in here. I have a tiny cup with the saline. I'm placing the cartridge, not the whole cartridge, but just mostly the tip of the cartridge into the tiny cup with saline, and this is how I'm cleaning my needle. I'm then using the gauze, I'm making sure it's nice and dry, and then I'm dipping the needle into a different color. This is how I clean the cartridges. Okay, more questions. No, Debbie, there is no such thing as one liner and one shader. All single needles are actually liners. So all single needles will be with the name RL. And the main difference will be the thickness of those needles. It might be short taper, long taper, medium taper. That's a different thing, different topic about the needles. And also they might be structured needles, they might be thicker and thinner, but just in general, single will be always a liner, but we use it to do the shading motion to achieve those dots. I was using two different machines. I was using, let me show you guys. I was actually showing that yesterday as well. I'm just going to wipe. You'll see how that section looks like. Yep, and what I want to show you is the difference between those hand pieces. Those I was using. So I was using the basic Aloor, and I was using the newest Aloor. Oh, wait, let's put it like this so you'll see the difference. For those of you who are using the basic Aloor, you already thought that it's a super tiny machine that is not vibrating almost at all. So it might be a bit surprising because the newest Aloor is even tinier. It's even smaller, and this is what I actually like about it. It won't be good for all of you. It won't be good for those who are used to work with the heavier handpiece, with the bigger handpiece. It will be good only for those who like the feeling that reminds them that they are actually working with the pen or pencil. And for me, it's so much easier to work with the lighter handpiece, with the smaller handpiece, especially when I do the hair strokes. It's just easier to maneuver with the smaller handpiece. But at the same time, this handpiece, despite the fact it's smaller than the basic Aloor, the weight of it is kind of similar. So despite the fact it's small, when you do the shading, you have enough of weight to do that nice shading motion. Okay, I'm checking more of the questions. No, Debbie, you haven't missed anything. The single is always RL. I'm sure you knew that. You were just double checking. And Xiang, yes, like I mentioned before, the single will be always RL. Saline. Alina, I was explaining about saline, the isotonic water, or what might be the other name of it. I forgot. It's just the solution that you are able to purchase in any pharmacy, on Amazon, anywhere. The sterile saline solution that I use to clean the cartridges. If I need to do that during the same session, if I use different colors. So I use the saline solution, a tiny cup, like the size of the cup is the same like I use for pigments. Maybe it's slightly bigger, but I just need a little bit to be able to dip in. I was using two different, oh no, today I was actually using the same one. I was using the Aloor cartridges for the basic, and I want to explain you a little bit. Actually, the Aloor Basic comes with the regular permanent makeup cartridges, and the Aloor Virtuo comes with the universal cartridges. So the cartridge I was using with the Aloor Virtuo is the one we are testing now, as we are going to have universal cartridges for the Aloor Virtuo as well. But a couple days ago I was working with the Quadron needles. You also will see some videos on my Instagram where I was using the Vertex needles, the Vertex Nano needles for my strokes. I like to use 0.5 for everything, to be honest, for the strokes and for the shading. So I'm not really switching to a thicker or thinner. If I do the strokes, I will do it with the 0.5 same single needle, and then if I do the shading, I'll use that same cartridge with one single 0.5, and I will do the shading with it as well. And I believe the Quadron is really nice needles, and they are not super pricey. So for those of you who haven't tried it, definitely I recommend to try. And the difference with the Vertex needles, I would say the biggest difference would be that they have that nice thin tip at the end. So for those of you who are struggling with the precision, that nice tiny tip, those they do have for their nano needles, will help you when you are drawing the strokes, because as thinner the tip, of course, as easier to draw the strokes with it. So this is what I feel about those two. Yes, thank you, Gedra. I forgot that name. Yes, exactly. Once again, 1 RL is the single needle you want to use for both. For single, for strokes, and for shading. It will be always RL. You only want to use RS, round shaders, not round liners, when you are looking for bigger configurations. So round shaders like 3 RS, 5 RS, 7 RS, depends on how much density you want, how thick your eyebrow is, and so on. And then Magnum, that's a different kind. Okay. I think I answered almost all your questions. If you have any more questions, please let me know. And I think we are going to finish for today. Oh, no, we are not going to finish. I'll just tell you quickly about the pigments, right? As I promised to speak about it a little bit. And I already started. I already gave you some tips on the differences. For those of you who are beginners, please, the most important thing is to keep practicing on latex. The most important thing is to try and do the correct movement where you are going to get that nice touch with the skin, when you are touching the skin in a nice way from the very beginning, and then you are lifting the needle outside with every single movement. So when you do nice pendulum motion or clock motion, you don't want to keep your needle straight and move back and forth. This is how you'll get lines, and this is how your columns, your sections will be visible. So you want to work on that as much as possible. As more times you'll try, as easier it will be to get those nice sections. Always make sure that your pressure is nice, that you only use the very tips of your needles, and all of those things I already spoke about in the very beginning of my live session. And guys, about the pigments, you know that there are two main kinds we usually use for our permanent makeup treatments, and those kinds are inorganic pigments and organic pigments. First, of course, I hope all of you know that organic has nothing to do with something natural, has nothing to do with fruits and veggies and plants and all of that kind of stuff. Organics are usually, not usually, they all are synthetics, and again, they have nothing to do with anything natural. We are not able to eat them, and they are not going to do anything nice for our skin or our body because of that name organic. It has nothing to do with that. Again, all organic ingredients, all organic colorants are synthetic colorants. And just in general, I don't want to give you too complicated information, because the pigment science, the colorants and all of that information is so difficult, and I know that no matter how many times I'm going to explain that, you'll still sit back and think like, okay, so what is the difference? I just want to tell you a couple of basic things. Those you will understand in the easiest way. And first, what you need to know is that there will be a difference, the main difference in how the color, how easy you are going to implant the color. Also, the amount of passes you are going to need with every, with different kind of pigment, and how the color is going to fade after some time. And probably the last thing, how long the color is going to stay in the skin. So these would be those main differences in those two different kinds, organic and inorganic. And let's begin with inorganic colors. Inorganic colors are all the colors we used to call minerals, in other words, or all the colors that we used to say that they are iron oxide based. It all will be the same. So no matter how we call them, inorganic, minerals, or iron oxide based pigments, those pigments will always be a little lighter, not that strong. Those colors will always have more chances that they will fade to a warmer shade, especially if we are going to implant the color in not a proper way, like I already explained you during this session. So if you missed it, make sure you are listening from the beginning. And so you need to understand how many passes we want to do and how we need to choose the color. If you are going to use inorganic colors properly, after some time, and usually it's 1 to 2 years, the color will simply fade, and it may leave that light warm shade, but if the implantation was right, it will fade almost completely. We are never able to tell that the pigment is going to fade 100% because we are implanting it in the first layer of dermis, and we cannot really guarantee that it will disappear completely, but we know that if we do it in the right way, it won't be visible. And that is the reason why we cannot really call our treatment semi-permanent, is because we will never be sure that the pigment disappeared completely and that the structure of the skin is exactly the same like before the permanent makeup. And that is the reason why it is actually permanent makeup, because even if we don't see the pigment with the naked eye, that doesn't mean that there is no residue in the skin at all and that we haven't changed the structure of the skin. And at least a little change definitely will mean that the treatment that was done was a permanent treatment, because the skin will never come back into the previous condition, despite the fact it may look exactly normal, fine, and absolutely healthy and smooth with the naked eye again. So it's important to understand that all the inorganic colors, they will fade into that warm shade as more you will implant, as more color will be in the skin, as more chances you will have that after 1 or 2 years your clients will come back with those orangey, reddish or pinkish results. But at the same time, inorganic colors are super soft. And for those of you who are just starting, for those of you who are not really able to feel the skin and feel the pressure, you may definitely feel that it's difficult to work with inorganic colors because they are not going into the skin that smooth, that fast. And that is one of the reasons why I advise to work with a slightly darker color for particular skin types, of course, not for mature skins. And what I like about the inorganic colors is that you are always able to get nice and soft healed results. And by soft results, I mean that even when you are getting those pixels, you clearly don't want to see those pixels like a super sharp dots after healing, and you will avoid that using the inorganic colors. We are all about those pixels, and we want to get those pixels no matter what. So what I like about the inorganic colors is that you always are going to get that soft result. It won't look super sharp, it won't look super intense, and also of course they are more forgiving, again, because they are lighter, they are not that strong. Even if you are in the beginning a bit more heavy-handed, or if you did more passes, obviously you choose the different color and you needed to do more passes, still that color is going to fade, which is great for me because you will have a chance to fix your first work, you'll have a chance to do a touch-up, you'll have a chance to change the style and all of that. With the organic colors, you need to understand that those colors will be definitely stronger. You will definitely need less passes, so you'll feel, especially if you are a beginner, you will feel like you are working with some kind of magic. You just did one pass and you wipe and you see a lot of color inside the skin. So you need to be careful with organic colors. You don't want to do the same amount of passes. You don't want to use dark colors, really dark colors when you are choosing the color. And you also need to understand that those colors are going to stay longer in the skin. So that is the reason why you want to choose your color wisely. Another thing about organic colors is that they will always have a chance to fade into that other side, and you will be able to see more grayish and bluish results. But at the same time, it all depends on your technique. Same like with organic ones. If your technique is going to be correct, if you are not going to choose the wrong color, if you are not going to implant too much of the pigment, you have a lot of chances that it's not going to stay for 7 or 10 years. But definitely those pigments will be less forgiving. Definitely they will stay longer in the skin, and definitely you'll have more chances to get those faded results after some time with that bluish or grayish hint. And of course, our color choice really depends on every single situation. It depends on the result we are trying to achieve. It depends on our client's wishes. It depends actually on our technique as well. Do you feel that you are heavy-handed or super light-handed? Also, it might be a reason why you choose this or that pigment. But I would say that all of the artists, skilled artists, time to time they use different pigments, different kinds. And as I mentioned, deluxe brows pigments, they are inorganic pigments, but I do like to add some organic. I do like to add organic colors, organic pigments, like for example the carbon black color that we have in the cases when I need it. But I prefer to recommend the inorganic colors for all the beginners, for all the artists who feel that they are heavy-handed. But again, with all the pigment, you just need to understand how every single pigment will work, how you need to choose the color, how many passes you need to do, what the result you need to see once you just finish the treatment. So once you are switching to a different brand, just make sure you are getting enough of the information about the technique and how the technique should be different when using this or another kind. And also, definitely do not think that changing the brand will make your results look better. If you are not getting good healed results, most likely it's not about the pigment, it's about your technique. And if you are going to follow all of those tips I just gave you today, and I gave you a lot for those of you who were listening in a very careful way, definitely will use a lot of information and will improve their technique. And then you'll see that with every pigment, when you are going to choose the color wisely, you are going to get the nice results. Another thing about the organic colors, I would advise you to dilute those colors at least a little bit when you do your shading techniques. That's to avoid those super sharp bold dots, especially if you are doing the pixelation, if you are doing the pointillism technique. It's so easy to go a little deeper, to implant more pigment inside those dots. And if you are using the pure organic color, your client will come back with the bigger, darker, more intense dots. So just be careful doing that. Okay guys, let me check your questions again and we will finish for today. I hope that you enjoyed the live session. I hope that you learned a lot. Please start trying. Show me what you have learned. Don't forget to tag me in your pictures. I will be more than happy to share your work. I will be more than happy to share your achievements. Samantha, if you are asking about the permablend, then yes, those pigments are organic pigments. Kisses, kisses, Carmen. Thank you for joining me all the way from Croatia. Wow, so far away. Diana, as I already mentioned, I like to use the inorganic more for everything, for strokes and for shading, but definitely there are situations when I feel the need using the organic colors. As I mentioned before, it all depends on what you are trying to achieve and on your client needs and the skin type and all of those different factors. But still, I'm the fan of inorganic colors. Okay guys, so I will catch up with all the other questions. If I'll see that I missed any of your questions, I'll definitely get back to you in comments. Thank you so much for joining me. I really hope that it was helpful. Let me know what other videos or live sessions you want me to do. I will be more than happy to share. Now more than ever, we have so much time. We have so much time for improvement. And it's definitely a great time to share the information, to keep learning, to be better every day. And this is what I wish to all of you. Just try to do more things, the things that you love. Try to spend your time wisely, same like you are choosing the pigment colors. Make sure you are also wisely choosing what you are doing, why and how. Try to stay positive as much as possible. Try to focus on yourself more than on focusing on others. Try to improve every single day. Try to be a better version of yourself every single day. And I promise you that if you are going to stay positive, if you are going to spend your time wisely, if you are going to practice, if your practice will end up like a kind of meditation for you, every single time with every single practice you are going to be better and better and better. So stay safe guys, stay healthy, and I'm super happy that so many of you were here with me today, and I hope that I'm going to see you soon. For those of you guys who are in the marathon, tomorrow we are going to start at the same time, like now at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Again, Angie Kvetkovsky, amazing Angie, will be joining us tomorrow. She will be showing us her signature eyeliner technique. She will be showing you some mapping tips. She will be giving you some tips about the differences in pigment for eyeliners, which is so interesting and so useful for those of you who are working with eyeliners or just planning to work. So make sure you tune in at 2 p.m. like every single day during this marathon. For those of you who want to join the marathon, please follow the link that you have above this post. You are still able to catch up with all the recorded videos, and those videos are going to stay in the group for a while, so you will be able to see all the previous videos we did already for hair strokes, for different templates and all the tips and tricks. And yeah, we still have 2 more days to go. I cannot wait to see you guys tomorrow. And again, thank you so much for joining me today, and have a great rest of the day guys. Bye. See you.